The night began like any other. The sky above the Pacific Ocean was calm, scattered with stars, the kind sailors and dreamers loved to stare at. But then, without warning, one of those stars moved. It started as a spark, a glimmer that drew eyes upward from city streets, beaches, and mountain peaks across half the planet. The spark grew brighter, burning through the clouds, splitting the heavens in two. Within minutes, the whole world was watching. Phones lit up. Cameras rolled. Satellites caught the first clear image, not a meteor, not debris, but something far larger. Smooth, symmetrical, and impossibly controlled. A ship. Across the globe, governments went on high alert. Military radars screamed warnings. Fighter jets were scrambled. Nuclear submarines surfaced from the deep. But even with all that power pointed toward the sky, no one dared to fire. Because the object wasn't attacking. It was slowing down. The world watched as the ship's descent turned into a graceful hover. A shadow stretched across the Pacific, blotting out the stars above Hawaii. Ocean waves rippled as if bowing beneath its weight. The ship didn't roar. It hummed, low, steady, alive, like the heartbeat of something ancient. Then, through every device on Earth, a voice spoke. Humans of Earth, we come in peace. Every screen turned white. Radios buzzed. Even devices without signals, old televisions, broken transmitters, came alive. The same calm voice echoed through them all, layered and resonant, as if many beings were speaking as one. Do not fear. We are the Varethi. We seek understanding, not conquest. We offer peace, knowledge, unity. For the first time in history, the world stopped fighting. Borders meant nothing. Wars paused mid-battle. The people of Earth, billions of them, stood united under the same sky, staring up in silence at the thing that had arrived to meet them. Governments gathered in emergency councils. Was this an invasion, or a miracle? 3 days later, the first human delegation met the Varethi. The meeting took place aboard a floating platform built in record time, half science station, half fortress, in the middle of the Pacific. The ship loomed above it like a silver mountain, half reflecting the blue of the sea below. The aliens descended in light, not metal. Their forms shimmered like liquid crystal, tall and slender, their skin a faint glow of color that shifted with emotion. They moved with precision, calm, silent, almost reverent. Their leader introduced himself as Talares, envoy of the Varethi Concord. His voice carried both warmth and authority, like someone who had spoken to civilizations before and expected to be heard. We have seen many worlds, he said. We have watched species rise and fall. Some we have guided. Some we have mourned. But you, humans of Earth, you are unlike any we have met. The human ambassador, a woman named Dr. Mara Chen, tried to stay composed. What do you mean by that? She asked. Talares tilted his head, his color shifting to a curious blue. Your planet speaks loudly. It carries scars, echoes of conflict. Yet here you stand, alive, reaching for the stars. He stepped closer, his eyes reflecting the ocean waves below. We have come to understand how. We have come to understand you. The talks began. Days passed. Scientists traded data. Linguists deciphered alien symbology. Leaders negotiated cautiously, never sure if the Varethi truly meant peace. The aliens shared fragments of their knowledge, energy so clean it left no trace, medicine that could mend bone in minutes, technology that could move matter with thought. Humanity was in awe. But the Varethi, in turn, were fascinated by something else. Not our inventions, not our cities, but our emotions. They watched humans argue, laugh, cry, and forgive. They studied how one person could risk their life for another, or how a nation could rebuild after tragedy. Talares often stood at the edge of the platform, gazing toward the horizon as ships circled below. Such fire, he said once. Such life. And then one day, during a diplomatic exchange, he made a simple request. We wish to understand your nature, he said. Show us your history. The humans hesitated. The room went silent. History. Of all the things the aliens could ask for, art, science, philosophy, they wanted that? Dr. Chen tried to smile. Our history is complicated, she said carefully. We've known peace, but also war. Progress, but also pain. Talaris' expression didn't change. "We have seen war," he replied softly. "But not like yours. You have endured what would have ended countless worlds. We must know how." The human delegation exchanged uncertain looks. There was no easy way to explain humanity's past, the blood, the conquest, the endless hunger to explore, to dominate, to survive. Still, Talaris waited patiently, his color shifting to the pale shade of expectation. "Please," he said, "show us who you are." That night, as the world debated how much truth to reveal, the ocean beneath the alien ship glowed faintly, reflecting the silent judgment of the stars. In secret, the United Nations authorized the transfer of humanity's entire digital history. Wars, revolutions, triumphs, failures, all of it. No filters. No edits. The truth, raw and unshaped. As the data uploaded to the Varethi vessel, a strange unease filled the control room. The hum of the alien ship deepened, as if it was breathing in the story of our species. The humans could only watch as lights pulsed across its surface, faster and faster, like a heartbeat quickening with disbelief. Then, for a long time, there was silence. Talaris' voice finally returned through the speakers, quieter now, slower. "We asked for understanding," he said. "But your history, it burns." And somewhere deep inside that colossal ship, the Varethi began to realize, peace on Earth was not the absence of war. It was what humans built after surviving it. The Varethi ship hovered in silence for 2 full days after receiving humanity's history. Its lights dimmed to a soft, pulsing gray, like a creature deep in thought. From Earth's surface, scientists and soldiers waited, wondering if they had made a terrible mistake. Had humanity just offended their first visitors from the stars? Had the truth of what we were, violent, stubborn, unpredictable, scared them away? Then, on the morning of the 3rd day, the alien voice returned. "Humans of Earth, your story is long. We wish to learn it properly. Let us begin the lesson." The United Nations assembled a new delegation, historians, philosophers, and AI archivists, to help guide the Varethi through the history they had requested. Among them was Dr. Mara Chen, the ambassador who had first spoken to Talaris. Now, she was tasked with the impossible, explaining thousands of years of human struggle to beings who had never known real war. The lesson began aboard the alien ship itself. When Mara stepped inside, she felt the air hum with energy, walls that shimmered like liquid glass, floors that seemed alive. Holographic orbs floated through the halls, glowing softly as they recorded and translated every word. Talaris greeted her at the entrance. His color had changed, a deeper, more thoughtful shade of blue. "Welcome, Dr. Chen," he said. "We have reviewed fragments of your past. So many beginnings. So many endings." She smiled faintly. "That's humanity for you. We start over a lot." He tilted his head. "We wish to understand why." They began with the dawn of civilization. Images filled the chamber, ancient humans painting on cave walls, shaping tools from stone, lighting fires under endless skies. The Varethi murmured in awe. "They lived with so little," one whispered, "and yet they dreamed of so much." Mara nodded. "That's how it always began for us, curiosity first, comfort later." They watched as humanity learned to grow food, build cities, and form kingdoms. The aliens were fascinated by the scale of it all, how humans cooperated, competed, and adapted so quickly. But as the centuries passed in fast forward, the tone of the images darkened. Armies marched. Empires clashed. Smoke filled the skies. The Varethi shifted uneasily, their soft lights flickering across the chamber walls. "You fought, your own kind," one asked quietly. "Why?" Mara took a breath. "For land. For power. For belief. Sometimes just for survival. We fought because we could. And sometimes, because we had to." Talaris' colors flickered between green and gray, confusion and sorrow. "Did no one stop you?" She shook her head. "Many tried. None succeeded for long." The holograms changed again, the Battle of Thermopylae, warriors holding a narrow pass against an empire. Then Genghis Khan's conquests, the rise and fall of Rome, the burning of cities, the rebuilding, the endless cycle. The aliens watched in silence. "You destroy, and then you rebuild," one said softly. over and over. Mara nodded. It's what we do best. Talara's voice carried both fascination and fear. Among the stars, war is rare. Civilizations that fight themselves do not last. Yet you endured. He looked at her, eyes like liquid silver. How did you survive your own violence? Mara hesitated, then answered quietly. Because we never forgot what it cost us. Hours passed. They moved on to humanity's greatest thinkers, Socrates, Newton, Curie, Einstein, minds that reached for the truth even while their worlds burned. The Varethi admired that contradiction most of all. You create beauty, Talaris whispered, in the middle of chaos. To them, that was a concept beyond reason, that a species could learn philosophy beside a battlefield, or paint art while bombs fell. And still, humanity moved forward. From ancient ships crossing oceans to rockets piercing the sky, they watched our species push against every limit, no matter how many times it was struck down. At one point, a young Varethi scientist asked a simple question. Were you ever united? Mara smiled sadly. Only when something tried to kill us. The chamber went silent again. By the time the lesson ended, the Varethi were quiet, their colors dimmed, their lights subdued. Talaris stood at the center of the room, surrounded by the ghosts of human history. So much pain, he said softly. So much loss. Yet you continue. He turned to Mara. Do you not fear yourselves? She met his gaze. Every day. But fear isn't what defines us. What defines us is what we do after the fear. For a long time, Talaris said nothing. Then, slowly, he raised a hand and gestured toward the stars visible through the ship's transparent hull. Perhaps that is why you reached the void, he murmured. You were never searching for peace, you were chasing meaning. When Mara returned to Earth that night, the skies above the Pacific still shimmered with the reflection of the alien craft. She looked up, wondering what the Varethi were thinking now, whether they still saw humanity as a civilization worth saving, or one worth avoiding. In the alien archives, the Varethi Council reviewed the footage in silence. They watched humanity's wars, its resilience, its contradictions. One of them whispered, almost in disbelief. They rise from their own ashes, again and again. Another answered. Then perhaps peace is not what they seek. Perhaps survival is their peace. Talaris stood apart, his form glowing faintly against the dark. No, he said softly. They do not seek peace because they already know what it costs. They remember it in every scar, every grave, every story. That is their strength, and their curse. And for the first time since their arrival, the Varethi began to fear not humanity's weapons, but humanity's will. They had wanted to understand humans. Now, they weren't sure they ever truly could. Because peace, they realized, was not humanity's natural state. It was something we fought for, bled for, and never took for granted. And that made the humans more dangerous and more extraordinary than any species they had ever met. The next session began under heavy clouds. From orbit, the Earth looked peaceful, blue oceans, white storms, green continents glowing with life. But the Varethi now knew better. They had seen what lay beneath that beauty, struggle, hunger, ambition, and something even greater, the will to rise, no matter the cost. Still, they wanted to understand more. So, once again, the humans opened their archives. And this time, they began with fire. The holograms filled the alien chamber with smoke and steel. Machines churned. Gears spun. Coal-black skies stretched over endless factories. It was the Industrial Revolution, humanity's leap into an age of invention and iron. The Varethi watched, entranced, as humans built wonders from nothing. Steam engines, railroads, ships that crossed entire oceans. But then they saw what came next, the price of progress. Cities choking in smog. Children laboring in factories. Empires growing fat on conquest. Talaris' colors shifted, dark and stormy. They advanced faster than they could control themselves, he murmured. Mara Chen, standing beside him, nodded. We always do. The projection shifted again, and suddenly, the world exploded. World War I. Trenches stretched for miles. The ground was mud and blood. Men huddled beneath a sky filled with gas and fire. The roar of cannons rolled through the chamber like thunder. Even the Varethi flinched. One of them whispered, horrified. They did this to each other. Mara's voice was quiet. Yes. On a scale no one had ever seen before. The aliens watched millions die. They saw soldiers crawl through barbed wire, wounded and broken, yet still advancing. They saw humanity invent new ways to kill, and new ways to survive. They could have ended their world, Talaris said softly. And yet, they rebuilt it. Mara looked at the images, the ruins, the graves, the flags rising again. That's what we do, she said. We bury the dead, we mourn, and then we start over. The Varethi didn't know whether to admire that or fear it. But then came the next war. The holograms shifted again, tanks rolled across Europe, sirens wailed in London, mushroom clouds bloomed over the horizon. The aliens recoiled as the light filled the chamber, brighter than anything they had seen. They split the atom, whispered one Varethi. They tore open the fabric of creation itself. Talaris' voice trembled. Why? What did they hope to gain? Mara didn't answer immediately. She simply pointed to the aftermath, the destroyed cities, the survivors walking through ash, the world united in horror. They learned, she said softly. The hard way. Always the hard way. The chamber fell silent. Then the humans showed the aftermath, the rebuilding, the creation of the United Nations, the birth of space exploration. The aliens saw rockets rise into the heavens where bombs had once fallen. They saw doctors curing diseases that once wiped out millions. They saw humans shaking hands across old battle lines. And the Varethi didn't understand. After such destruction, one asked, how did you not fall into despair? Mara smiled faintly. Because we had to believe there was something worth saving. She looked at the image of Earth from space, small, fragile, glowing. That belief kept us alive. But not all the lessons were hopeful. The next sequence showed civil wars, nuclear standoffs, and endless smaller conflicts. Talaris' colors dimmed to gray. You never stopped fighting, he said. Even after you learned how terrible it could be. Mara nodded slowly. Peace is a moment, not a state. It's something we earn, and then lose, and earn again. The Varethi Council watched, and for the first time, they began to understand something terrifying. Humanity's strength wasn't just its intelligence or technology. It was its endurance. They fought, rebuilt, and fought again, never yielding, never giving up. To the Varethi, who had lived in peace for millennia, that kind of persistence was unimaginable. They are not conquerors, said one elder. They are survivors. Talaris turned to Mara. Tell me, human, how did your kind endure this? How did you not destroy yourselves? She looked up at him, tired but proud. Because we remembered. Every war, every failure, every loss, we carried it with us. We built our future on the bones of our past. He stared at her, silent. That is not peace, he said softly. That is madness. Mara smiled. Maybe, but it worked. After the lesson ended, the Varethi returned to their ship in silence. They gathered in the council hall, surrounded by shifting lights and data streams of human history. Some of them trembled. Others stared at the screens, unable to look away. They wield power that could burn the stars, one said. And yet they build schools beside their battlefields. They kill, they grieve, they forgive, and they try again, another added. Such contradiction cannot survive. Talaris watched the human archive, the image of a soldier helping a child amid ruins, of astronauts gazing down at Earth. He whispered, and yet, they do. The council fell silent as the last image faded. Earth hung alone in the darkness, small, fragile, and burning with light. Their fire is both their weapon and their curse, said the eldest Varethi. If it ever spreads beyond their world, it could consume everything. Talaris shook his head. No, he said quietly. Their fire is what keeps them alive. The universe is cold, but they burn anyway. He looked down at the planet below, glowing like an ember against the void. Perhaps that is what the stars saw in them, he murmured. A spark that refuses to die. And so, the Varethi learned another truth about humanity. Peace, for humans, was not the absence of war. It was the space between battles. A fragile, flickering light that somehow never went out. The halls of the Varethi flagship were silent. No hum, no chatter, no music, only the low whisper of thought echoing through endless corridors of light. Since the last lesson, the aliens had not spoken to the humans. They said they needed time to reflect. But among themselves, the debate had already begun. For the first time in centuries, the Varethi were afraid. In the council chamber, a vast dome suspended over the Pacific, the leaders gathered. Their forms flickered, shimmering blue, green, and gold, shifting with emotion. In the center stood Talaris, the envoy who had once spoken warmly of peace. Now, his color burned faintly red, the shade of conflict. "You have all seen their history," he began. "You have seen the wars they fought, the weapons they built, the fire they unleashed upon their own world." He paused, looking around the chamber. If they have done this to themselves, what would they do to others? A murmur rippled through the council. High Chancellor Rethan, an elder whose light shimmered pale silver, raised his voice. "They cannot be trusted. No species that glorifies war can be trusted. We should leave this planet and mark it forbidden." But another voice, soft, melodic, broke through the tension. It was Virail, the youngest of the council. Her glow was calm and golden. "And yet," she said, "they are still alive." Rethan turned sharply. "Alive, yes. But at what cost?" Virail's colors deepened. At the cost of learning. Of changing. Of choosing mercy when they could have chosen revenge. The council stirred. Talaris watched silently as she continued. "We saw them rebuild after every fall. We saw them save the weak, heal the wounded, even forgive their enemies. That is not the way of beasts." Rethan's tone hardened. "Forgiveness? You call it that? I call it luck. They are reckless, they destroy because they can." "No," Virail answered softly. "They destroy because they feel too deeply. And they save for the same reason." The debate went on for hours. Voices rose and fell like waves, light flashing across the chamber walls. Talaris said nothing. He only stared at the images of Earth, billions of humans going about their lives, unaware that the fate of their first contact hung in the balance. Farmers in fields. Children in schools. Doctors saving lives. And soldiers still standing guard. There it was again, the contradiction that haunted the Varethi, kindness and cruelty, side by side. When the council finally quieted, Talaris spoke again. "We came here offering peace," he said. "But perhaps peace cannot be given. It must be understood." He turned toward the great viewing window, where the blue curve of Earth glowed beneath them. "If we leave without understanding them, then we have learned nothing." Rethan's voice cut through the silence. "And if you stay, Talaris, what then? Do you believe you can teach peace to a species that worships its own pain?" Talaris didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew the truth. Humanity didn't need to be taught peace. They had been chasing it for thousands of years, bleeding for it, dying for it. Maybe that was what made them terrifying. They earned every moment of calm they ever had. The next day, Talaris broke protocol. He went down to Earth, alone. His ship descended quietly into the mountains of northern France, where endless rows of white gravestones stretched toward the horizon. It was a war memorial. The resting place of soldiers long dead, some from a century ago, some more recent. The air was still. The wind carried the faint sound of a flag rustling. Talaris walked among the graves, his steps light against the soil. Every stone had a name. Every name had a story. He sensed the echoes of sorrow, of honor, of memory. He found an old man sitting by one of the graves, dressed in faded uniform colors. The man looked up and smiled wearily. "You here for someone too?" Talaris tilted his head, unsure how to answer. "I am here, to understand." The old man chuckled softly. "Then you came to the right place. This is where the understanding usually begins." He placed a small flower on the grave beside him. "My grandfather fought here. He died believing the world would never fight again. My father fought in the next one. And me." He tapped his chest. I fought to make sure there wouldn't be another. Talares studied him. And yet your world still fights. The man nodded. Yeah. But we remember. That's what matters. We remember what it costs. He looked up at the alien, his eyes tired but kind. Peace isn't a gift, friend. It's a scar. You carry it with you, so you don't forget. For a long time, Talares said nothing. The Varethi had lived in peace for millennia, so long they had forgotten what it took to earn it. Now, standing among the graves of a violent yet noble species, he began to understand what Virel had meant. You remember the pain, he whispered. And from it, you build something better. The old man smiled faintly. That's the idea. When Talares returned to the ship, he called the council once more. His voice was calm, but his colors glowed bright with conviction. I have walked among them, he said. I have seen their grief, and their mercy. They fight not because they love war, but because they fear losing what little peace they have. The council listened in silence. They do not destroy for pleasure, he continued. They destroy to protect, to endure, to remember. Rethan's voice trembled. You would have us trust them? Talares shook his head. No. But I would have us understand them. For they are not monsters. They are what every world becomes, when peace is forgotten and then painfully found again. For the first time, the council did not argue. The Varethi, who had thought themselves the masters of peace, now faced the truth. That the humans, in all their chaos and cruelty, might understand it better than they ever could. And somewhere deep within that shimmering ship, the aliens began to question not humanity's morality, but their own. Had their peace made them wise? Or had it made them weak? The morning light over Earth was soft and golden, drifting through the clouds like a promise. From orbit, the planet looked peaceful, no armies, no battles, just a living world breathing quietly. But the Varethi now understood that this peace had not been free. It had been bought, paid for with lives, and guarded by memory. After Talares' unauthorized visit to the old battlefield in France, something changed among the council. The arguments quieted. The fear softened. Now, the Varethi wanted to see for themselves. Not the cities. Not the machines. But the sacrifices that made those things possible. And so began what history would later call the pilgrimage to the dead. A small Varethi vessel descended toward Earth, shimmering like glass under sunlight. Its passengers were silent, scientists, philosophers, and elders, beings who had lived entire centuries without ever seeing war or grief. They landed first in Normandy. The air smelled of salt and rain. The beach stretched wide and empty, waves whispering against the sand. But the cliffs above still bore scars, rusted metal, fragments of old bunkers, silent reminders of the chaos that had once filled this place. A human guide, Captain Elias Ward, walked with them. He was young, but his voice carried the weight of generations. Thousands died here in one morning, he said quietly. Not for land. Not for conquest. For the chance that their children wouldn't have to do the same. The Varethi moved among the markers scattered across the fields. Each white cross, each name, each date told a story, a life ended in pursuit of something larger than itself. Virel, the youngest counselor, knelt beside one grave. Her light dimmed to a soft blue, the color of morning. So many, she whispered. They must have known they would die. Elias nodded. They knew. And they came anyway. She looked up at him, her form trembling faintly. Why? What could make them choose death? He hesitated, then said softly, love. Not the kind you think. Love for the ones they'd never meet. The Varethi stood in silence. For beings who had lived endless centuries, this idea, dying for strangers, for unborn generations, was almost unthinkable. They left flowers of light upon the graves. And for the first time, the Varethi performed a human act. They bowed their heads. Their next journey took them east, to Hiroshima. The city shone bright and modern now, clean streets, green parks, children laughing in the sunlight. But at its heart stood the Peace Memorial Dome, preserved just as it had been after the blast. The Varethi could still feel it, the echo of unimaginable heat, the wave of sorrow frozen in time. Talares stood before the memorial flame, its steady glow reflected in his silver eyes. Your species unleashed this, he said softly, and yet you let it burn as a reminder. A Japanese historian standing nearby nodded. We do not hide our scars. We keep them, so we never make the same mistake again. Virail touched the air near the flame. Her colors shimmered with deep emotion. Among the stars, we hide our tragedies. You display yours. We have to, the historian replied. If we forget what we did, we might do it again. The aliens stood in silence, surrounded by the sound of wind chimes and the laughter of children. The contrast was unbearable and beautiful. They had expected to find a world haunted by its violence. Instead, they found one that had transformed it into wisdom. Their final stop was Arlington National Cemetery, in the hills above Washington, D.C. Snow fell lightly on endless rows of white stones. The aliens moved slowly, their lights glowing softly against the winter air. There were no words spoken here. Only silence, deep, sacred, and human. They paused at the tomb of the unknown soldier. The guard stood perfectly still, rifle in hand, his breath misting in the cold. Talaris watched him for a long time. He guards a grave with no name, he said quietly. Why? A nearby officer answered softly. Because someone must remember, even when no one else can. That line stayed with the Varethi long after they left. They had no monuments to their dead. Their civilization had erased sorrow long ago, choosing not to remember pain. But now, as they stood before the silent tomb, they realized what they had lost. To forget pain is to forget meaning. And without meaning, peace is just an empty word. When the pilgrimage ended, the Varethi returned to orbit. They did not speak for a long time. Finally, Talaris broke the silence. I have walked among their dead, he said. And I have seen their living honor them. This is not the behavior of savages. Virail's colors glowed faintly gold. They understand peace better than we do, she said. Because they remember the cost. Rethan, the elder who had once called humanity dangerous, spoke next. His voice was heavy. Perhaps we feared them because they are what we used to be. No, said Talaris softly. They are what we could become, if we remembered how to suffer, and still choose compassion. The chamber fell silent again. Below them, Earth turned slowly, its lights glowing like constellations across the dark. Talaris placed a hand on the window, his eyes reflecting the planet's surface. Their peace is not built on silence, he said. It is built on voices, voices that still cry out from the soil. And in that moment, the Varethi understood. Peace was not the absence of pain. It was the act of carrying it, together, and still choosing to live. That night, as the ship drifted above the sleeping Earth, Talaris recorded a message in the Varethi archives. They remember the dead not to mourn, but to guide the living. We sought to teach them peace, but they have shown us something greater. The courage to face memory, and not look away. For several nights, the great Varethi vessel drifted in orbit above Earth, its golden hull reflecting the planet's glow. Inside, the council was silent. They had come to teach. They had left their world believing themselves wise, guardians of peace, bearers of enlightenment. But now, they were not so certain. The images of graves, flames, and human endurance still haunted them. They had seen a species that could destroy itself 1,000 times, and still find reasons to hope. And deep within the hearts of the Varethi, something began to stir. Not fear of humans, but fear of what their existence meant. In the observation chamber, Talaris stood alone, staring down at the planet's lights. Each city glimmered like a constellation on the dark surface of the world. From this height, it was impossible to tell where war had once burned. All he saw was light, countless, defiant, human light. He barely noticed when Rethan entered. The elder's voice was low and cautious. You've been quiet since the pilgrimage. I've been thinking, Talaris replied, about what they are, and why the stars speak of them with such an ease. Rethan's eyes dimmed. You've heard the rumors too. Talaris turned. Rumors. The elder hesitated, then gestured toward a console. A projection shimmered to life, encrypted transmissions, hidden archives, forbidden data from other civilizations. We were not the first to encounter them, Rethan said. Long ago, before they reached the stars, Before their first radio signals, other watchers saw them. Quietly. From afar. Talaris frowned. And Rethan's voice grew heavy. They observed what we have just seen, their wars, their inventions, their endless cycles of conflict. And they feared what would happen when such creatures learned to leave their world. The projection changed, old recordings from the early 21st century. Launches. Satellites. The first steps on the moon. And then, further still, colonization attempts on Mars, asteroid mining, faster ships, the beginnings of humanity's reach into the void. They saw it, Rethan said softly. The spark of expansion. The hunger to explore. And they called it the coming fire. The phrase hung in the air like a curse. Talaris stepped closer, his colors flickering with unease. The coming fire. Rethan nodded. The belief that one day, humanity would spread, not to conquer, not to enslave, but simply because they could. Their drive is unstoppable. They survive every wound, every fall. The galaxy fears that when they finally reach the stars, nothing will stop them. Talaris stared at the screen, watching a grainy image of humans building a rocket out of scrap metal, cheering as it barely reached orbit. Their faces were dirty, tired, but smiling. They fear that, he asked. Their joy. Their will. Yes, Rethan said quietly. Because will is more dangerous than weapons. Later, the council gathered to discuss what they had learned. The chamber glowed with somber light. Some demanded retreat, to leave Earth and erase all records of contact. Others argued to stay, to guide humanity before it grew too strong. The debate raged. But through it all, Talaris remained silent, watching the blue world below. Finally, he spoke. We came to bring peace, he said. But peace cannot be given. It must be chosen. He looked around at the others. You say they are dangerous because they never stop fighting. But perhaps that is their greatest strength. Virail turned toward him, her form trembling faintly. Strength built on violence is still violence. No, Talaris replied. It is strength built on endurance. On memory. On pain. They learned to master chaos because they had no choice. Rethan's voice was grave. And what happens when that chaos spreads beyond their world? Talaris looked back at Earth, glowing in the dark. Then the universe will have to learn from them, as we did. The council fell silent. For the first time in millennia, the Varethi faced a truth they could not debate away. They had built their peace on comfort, on avoiding pain, hiding history, and silencing fear. Humanity had built theirs on scars. The contrast was unbearable and inspiring. Perhaps that's why the stars fear them, Virail whispered. Because they remind us of what we once were, wild, unbroken, alive. And what we no longer are, Rethan added. That night, Talaris opened a private channel to the human delegation. Morachen's face appeared on the screen, tired but warm. I was wondering when you'd call, she said with a small smile. You've been quiet. I've been learning, Talaris admitted. Mora, why do you keep reaching? Even when it hurts. Even when the universe itself fears you. Mara looked out the viewport behind her, where the earth hung in the distance. Her answer was simple. Because we were born in the dark. Every step forward is a rebellion against it. Talaris said nothing. He simply watched her, one fragile being among billions, and for the first time in his long life, he felt something like awe. When the transmission ended, Talaris recorded another entry in his personal archive. The fear of humanity is not their violence, but their persistence. They do not surrender, even to despair. Their fire is not destruction, it is defiance. And the cold of space will not extinguish it. He looked down once more at Earth, its lights flickering beneath clouds. They will come, he whispered. And when they do, the stars will never be the same. And far away, beyond the reach of Earth's faint radio waves, something ancient stirred. An old network of alien civilizations, reawakening old warnings. They had heard the signal. They had heard us. And they were afraid. The first whispers began 3 nights after the Varethi broadcast their message. It was meant to be simple, a declaration of peace, a formal statement that first contact had been made. But the message did not stop at the Varethi borders. It spread. Through trade networks, across relay beacons, from one star to the next, carried by curiosity, and then by fear. The humans are real, one transmission said. They are awake. The galaxy had long spoken of Earth as a myth, a primitive world, violent and unpredictable, sealed away by its own chaos. But now that myth had become real. And myths have power. Across dozens of systems, governments and coalitions began to whisper behind encrypted channels. Some spoke with fascination, others with dread. They survived nuclear fire. They thrive in radiation. They kill their own kind and call it progress. Each story twisted, distorted, and spread faster than light. On one world, a council ordered weapons research to resume in case the Terrans rise. On another, preachers declared Earth to be the birthplace of the End Flame, a species destined to consume the stars. And at the center of it all, the Varethi stood alone, the first to meet humanity, the first to understand the truth behind the fear. Talaris read the transmissions in silence. Each report carried more hysteria, more paranoia. Some of the messages didn't even sound like language anymore, just data streams filled with warnings and screams. Virail floated beside him, her form dim with anxiety. They think we've doomed the stars, she said softly. That by contacting Earth, we've awakened a plague. A plague. Talaris repeated. They call a species of hope and sorrow a plague. They don't see what we saw, Virail replied. They only see the ruins. The fire. The madness. Talaris clenched his hands, his color flashing bright and sharp. Then they have forgotten what it means to fight for peace. Meanwhile, on Earth, the human delegations began to notice a change. The Varethi envoys grew quieter. Their messages slowed. Their ships hovered higher, keeping their distance. Mara Chen felt it first, that faint shift in tone, like static in a once clear signal. When her requests for updates went unanswered, she sent a personal transmission directly to Talaris. "You're not telling us something," she said. "What's happening up there?" The alien hesitated. Behind him, the council chamber flickered with unrest, dozens of Varethi voices arguing across wavelengths. Finally, Talaris spoke. "The stars have heard of you. They are unsettled." Mara frowned. "Unsettled?" "They fear you," he admitted. "Your past, your potential. The fact that you survived everything you've done to yourselves." She laughed softly, not from humor, but disbelief. "We barely survived. You think that makes us dangerous?" "It makes you unpredictable," Talaris said. "And the galaxy fears what it cannot predict." Far away, the Consortium of Worlds, an ancient interstellar alliance, convened an emergency session. In a chamber the size of a mountain, under a ceiling of stars, thousands of envoys argued. They will spread. They will conquer. They are chaos given form. A single voice, cold and mechanical, silenced the room. "Then we must contain them, before they leave their cradle." The vote was swift. The order was clear. Earth was to be quarantined. No contact. No trade. No aid. And any civilization that defied the order would share their fate. When the message reached the Varethi, the council chamber erupted. They're condemning an entire species. They're afraid. They have reason to be. Rethan, the elder, stood and spoke with trembling authority. "We cannot oppose the consortium. To defy them is to invite annihilation. The humans must be isolated." But Talaris rose too, his voice sharp as thunder. "No. They are not monsters, they are mirrors. They show us what we've forgotten: courage, struggle, hope." The council shouted him down. "Enough. You are blinded by sentiment. You've spent too long among them." "Yes," Talaris said softly, "and that's why I understand them." He looked around the chamber, at the faces of his people, terrified and uncertain. "You call yourselves enlightened, yet you would destroy what you fear to understand." Virail's light trembled. "Talaris, what are you going to do?" He turned toward the viewport, where Earth shone blue against the black. "I'm going to warn them." Hours later, aboard a small shuttle cloaked in silence, Talaris sent one final transmission. To the leaders of Earth, the stars are moving against you. They fear your strength, your history, your will. They mean to isolate your world. Mara Chen's voice came through, faint and shocked. You're risking everything by telling us this. Peace is not worth keeping if it means letting injustice live, he said. We will not abandon you. Back in the Varethi capital, alarms blared. The council discovered his betrayal. Rethan ordered his immediate recall. He has chosen the humans, the elder declared. Then he will share their fate. But by then, Talara's ship had already vanished, dropping into deep shadow, hidden among the debris fields orbiting Earth. As the stars whispered and the galaxy trembled, two truths became clear. The first, humanity had become the most feared species in the known universe. The second, one alien, against every law of his kind, had chosen to stand beside them. From his hidden outpost above the Pacific, Talaris watched the planet rotate beneath him. They will come for you, he said quietly. But when they do, they will learn what it means to face the children of Earth. The transmission log blinked. Message sent. And somewhere deep within the network of alien worlds, a final whisper spread, faint, chilling, unstoppable. The Deathworlders have allies. The night Earth went quiet, every sky watcher on the planet saw it. A single streak of light, brighter than any comet, cutting across the heavens. To most, it looked beautiful. To the governments watching from secret command rooms, it looked like the beginning of war. Because that light wasn't human. It was a consortium warship, enormous, silent, and ancient. It had come to enforce the quarantine. Above the Pacific Ocean, it spread its shadow. No words. No warning. Just silence, deep and cold. From his hidden outpost in orbit, Talaris watched it arrive. He knew what it meant. He knew what the consortium was capable of. But he also knew what humanity was capable of. They won't understand, said Virel beside him, her colors trembling with fear. If they attack, humanity will fight back. It will start a fire that can't be contained. Talaris looked down at the blue planet below. That's what the stars never understood, he said quietly. The fire has already started. He activated a transmission, encrypted, narrowband, pointed directly at a single human facility buried deep under the mountains of Colorado. Mara Chen, he said. It's happening. The consortium is moving to strike. They will disable your satellites, cut your power, isolate your planet. And you? She asked, voice tight. You'll be targeted for helping us. I made my choice, he replied. Now you must make yours. Below, on Earth, the world braced. Governments scrambled. Defense networks lit up. But there was no panic, not this time. They'd seen invasion before. They'd seen extinction before. This was just another impossible challenge, and humanity had never met one it couldn't face. High above the clouds, the consortium ship opened its array, a lattice of light spanning miles. Its goal wasn't destruction. It was control. A suppression field meant to silence every electronic signal on Earth, turning the planet dark and deaf. But as the field expanded, something unexpected happened. The humans fought back, not with weapons, but with noise. Hundreds of transmitters, satellites, and ground-based arrays began broadcasting at once. Not military codes, not surrender messages, but voices. Music. Speeches. Songs. Laughter. Recordings of human history, from the first spark of radio to the landing on the moon. A flood of human sound filled space, defying the silence. They're not attacking, Virel whispered. They're speaking. Talaris listened, his eyes widening. Across the vacuum, the echoes of humanity's spirit roared. They want the galaxy to hear them, he said. They're saying, we're still here. The consortium fleet hesitated. Their algorithms couldn't comprehend defiance without violence. Their sensors read the noise as interference, static, chaos. But it wasn't chaos. It was life. And for the first time, the cold silence of space was broken by the pulse of a living world. Talaris smiled faintly. You see, Virel? They don't need weapons to fight. Their greatest power is their voice. The consortium's leader, a crystalline intelligence known as the Primarch Node, grew impatient. "Silence them," it commanded. The warship's main cannon charged, a beam capable of slicing through mountains. The planet below began to glow in its targeting grid. Talaris didn't wait. He accelerated his small vessel directly toward the massive ship. Its shields flared, but he kept going, diving straight into the energy field. "Talaris!" Virail shouted. "You'll be destroyed." "Maybe," he said softly. "But maybe that's the point." He opened a channel to Earth one last time. "Tell them, never to stop speaking. Never to hide who they are." Then he turned his ship toward the beam and overloaded his reactor. The explosion was small, a spark against the size of the warship. But that spark struck true. The beam destabilized. Energy cascaded backward, tearing through the ship's systems. And in an instant, the silence shattered. From the ground, the people of Earth saw the sky ignite. A burst of light, gold and blue, split the darkness. The consortium ship broke apart, its fragments burning as they fell into the ocean. For a moment, the world was still. Then, one by one, the radios came back. The music returned. And humanity's voice rose again, stronger than before. In the aftermath, Virail broadcast a single message across the consortium network. "The Varethi will not stand by while peace is used as a weapon. You called them deathworlders. You called them dangerous. But they are alive, more than any of us." Her message spread through every relay, every station. And something strange began to happen. Other species, long silent, long afraid, began to answer. "We hear you. We remember what it was to hope. The humans are not alone." Across the stars, the whisper became a chorus. On Earth, a memorial was built in orbit, a small station of glass and silver, facing the rising sun. At its center burned an eternal flame, powered by a fragment of Talaris' ship. Mara Chen stood before it and spoke to the cameras. "He came to teach us peace," she said. "But he reminded us of something deeper. That peace isn't the absence of struggle, it's the choice to rise, again and again, no matter how dark it gets." She looked out at the stars. "We will rise. And when the stars call again, we'll answer, not with silence, but with fire." Far away, on a distant moon, a transmission replayed endlessly in the dark. "They remember their dead not to mourn, but to guide the living. Their fire is not destruction, it is defiance. And the cold of space will not extinguish it." The voice belonged to Talaris. The Varethi kept it, not as warning, but as scripture. And in the centuries that followed, when new travelers crossed the void and asked where it all began, the stars would whisper the same answer. It began on a world of storms and scars. It began with the humans. It began with the deathworlders, and the fire that would not die.